Conversation is going round. People talking about the colors come to town. Fresh as a summer breeze, she'll take you by surprise.
Hello and welcome to another fabulous episode of Freshwaves. We've got a great show lined up today. We've got a great show lined up every day on Freshwaves. It's a Freshwaves kind of day. Our executive producer is Mr. Ivan Harris, and working the board this morning on the technical side of things, we have the one and only Jason Rumball. A big shout out to Reese's Market and Bakery for the fabulous muffins that they've given us in the studio this morning. They're at 5758 Main Street in Stouffville. Today, I would like to talk about Christy Blatchford. I've been a big-time Christy Blatchford fan since I was young. I've admired the way she does her reporting. I love the way she writes. And I think that on February 12th this year, we lost a great Canadian journalist, the likes of whom I don't think we will see for a very long time. There isn't anyone in the ranks coming up that I can see that's any match for Christy Blatchford. She was my go-to for the truth, regardless of whether I believed in her opinion or not. I always knew that with Christy, I was going to get the truth as she saw it, with a lot of facts behind it and a lot of expertise, hours and hours and hours spent in many courtrooms, hours and hours and hours on the field, in the field. She just was my journalistic hero. Joining me in the studio this morning is the one and only Chris Mayberry. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Bren. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Now, you have a background in journalism, in broadcasting. You've just done it all. And you actually had the privilege of knowing Christy Blatchford.
I did. I first knew her when I was working sports at CKAY Radio in Toronto, and she was writing feature material, really kind of light pieces for the Toronto Sun. Mm-hmm. And then I moved over to the Canadian Press's broadcast division and ran their sports department. And I was, for quite a few years in the 1990s, part of the Canadian sports journalistic traveling roadshow. We would cover Olympics and it was, yes. And, Stanley Cups and Grey Cups and the national stories. And
right.
And Christy was always part of that when the Olympics came around. And there were some funny, great stories regarding Christy on the road with the journalists. It was a treat to be around her. Always was.
Now, she's quite a crackerjack. And,
I call her a trailblazer.
A trailblazer. That's a nice
that
way
would
of putting
be my
it.
phrase for her. Because can you imagine in 1975 or 6, I was just leaving college to get into radio for the first time. She was the first female sports columnist in Canada. Oh. Now, just to be a female sports reporter back in those days, I mean, even today, what females have to face compared to what, it's a male-oriented, still is. Sports is still a male-oriented, world. In the 70s, the abuse that she must have had to take. Oh, yeah. And to put up with that and just go about her business and do the great work she did. I have always been a Christy Blatchford fan from the time I started reading her in the 70s. And it was a treat to meet her and get to know her. And she had a side of her that you didn't want to cross. If she thought you were wrong or had done something that affected her one day, it was legendary how Christy would react. I never saw that side of her.
You were fortunate.
Toward me. I was very fortunate, you bet. We got along great. But I certainly know of people who got the Christy Blatchford treatment. Well, in fact, when she was at the Globe and Mail, she had this job as the first female sports columnist in Canada. And took over from Dick Beddoes, of all people.
Wow.
And he had that job, and then
Those
Dick
are big
went,
shoes to follow.
No kidding. And Dick went into television, and she took his job as the Globe and Mail's top sports columnist. She only held that job for a few years, and the reason she left it was because an editor had made the horrific mistake of trying to say, well, I think you should write this way and do this, and I'm going to get a writing coach to help you with this. And she walked out and said a few words and then said, no, you're not, and walked out the door. Mm-hmm. And that's how she left the Globe and Mail the first time. And, so that was the side of Christy that, not all of us saw, but she was her own person. And I call her a trailblazer, and I think she was every bit that, and an outstanding journalist. And let me say one more thing, Bren. Since she's passed, yes, the accolades have come in and all deserved, but there have been people who've come out and said, Christy Blatchford, Well, to me, these people just disagreed with her opinion. Mm-hmm. Well, that's fine. And she wouldn't have a problem with that. But to sort of dismiss her as, she was no journalist because she believed this and this and this, well, that's a pile of hooey.
I agree. And I think when you read some of the things that true journalists have written, like Rex Murphy. Rex Murphy's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
Rex Murphy
great.
Didn't get anywhere he is today because of his good looks. He just says it the way he says it, and
I can relate to that.
And he talks about her craft, and it was a craft to her. Mm-hmm. He talks about the way she was sharp and clear, and she was so set in her principles. I always admire someone who has convictions. Mm-hmm. The person who swings with the wind and 1 minute says, yes, and I can see it from this side, and then yes, and I can do this. No. Tell me how you feel. Whether I agree with you or not is not the point. The point is I'd like to know where you're coming from, and I appreciate your honesty.
There's no problem with people that see both sides of a story, but they shouldn't be columnists.
Exactly.
They shouldn't be people that are paid to give opinions. If you're going to give your opinion, it's got to be, you got to say, okay, I've looked at it from all angles. Here's my opinion.
Here's what I see. And that's kind of how she always put things, I thought, when she was talking. And Rex Murphy said, she courted no group, bowed to no fad, curried no favor, and always said what it was she thought should be said. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Without equivocation, always getting straight to the heart of what was at the issue. And I think that says it all.
Yeah.
And that
well
is,
put.
If that's all you can do in journalism, you've done a fantastic job. Because in this day and age, with all the fake news and the nonsense and garbage that goes on, if I was hearing too much clutter, I would tune into Christy Blatchford to see what she thought of it.
Yeah.
I would always be disappointed if she wasn't covering the story. Darn. I
want to cover
get
everything.
That perspective, because that's it. I find it really difficult in this day and age to find an honest voice.
Yeah, one that'll stay true to him or his or herself on every story.
And is not
issue.
Sponsored by
exactly.
a major company that they don't want to offend in one way or the other.
Sadly, that's where journalism is going, and it's you got to please your masters, and the only master she pleased was her own beliefs. And
it's a great way to be.
Yeah.
And she had her first column on October 27th. 1975.
Yeah, in the Globe and Mail.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
1975.
Yeah.
Weren't we fortunate to have a journalist like that that's around for that length of time and still had the vim and vigor for the job? Really still enjoyed it. She liked what she was doing. Obviously mellowed out as she got a little older, this...
as we all
but
do.
I enjoyed it just as much. Mm-hmm. That Christy Blatchford sitting on her couch with her dog and she's always rubbing his head and, listening to her on 1010 sometimes where you could hear her yelling at the cat in the background. Yeah. The guys are on there doing their thing, and she's talking to the dog, yelling at the cat, opening the door, letting the dog out. Wait a second, guys, I'll be right back. She opens the door, lets the dog back in.
Well, but you can relate to that. That's
real.
life, Yeah.
That's how people are.
Yeah.
Now, it would drive us all nuts if every single reporter did that all the time.
Yeah.
But with Christy, come on.
Yeah.
She'd put in her time.
She had paid her dues.
She had paid her dues.
Yeah. Now, you met her, correct?
Yes, I was really privileged to meet her last year in Toronto at the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, the JCCF, for lack of having to say that over again. And they were giving out the George Jonas Freedom Award, and Christy Blatchford was the recipient of it in 2019. And she was absolutely brilliant. It was wonderful to hear her speak, and I'm really, really happy. You know, it was kind of like meeting, for most people who want to meet their favorite rock star, like, oh, there's Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
And they don't know what to say.
Yeah.
I was like, it's Christy Blatchford. Hi, Christy.
Now, you had a conversation with her.
When I first walked in, I was standing beside my husband going, Look,
it's
Christy
Christy
Blatchford.
It's Paul McCartney.
There she is. There she is. Because she's someone I looked up to for so many years.
Yeah.
A room packed full of lawyers.
Okay, yeah. And she covered the courts for so many years.
Oh, you can imagine how funny it was. Oh, my goodness. Lawyers and their wives and husbands and partners and tables that were big law firms all sitting at, one table and everything. And it was not black tie, but it was formal.
Okay, yeah.
And everybody was dressed to the nines. Mm-hmm. And Christy wore a dress.
Yeah, okay.
With a jean
I never
jacket.
saw her there.
And the buzz around the room was, she's wearing a jean jacket.
Yeah, not that she's wearing a dress.
Look at that, she's wearing a jean jacket. Is that Christy Blatchford? Yeah, there's Christy. She's wearing a jean jacket. It was hilarious. And great. She got up after dinner, and I felt sorry for the gentleman who is sort of in charge, and he had to introduce her.
Okay.
And nobody was listening.
No,
it's like
of course, yeah.
Finishing off your dessert, chatting with people at the table, anticipating Christy Blatchford, and it's just big shoes to be before or after. You know what I mean?
Of course, yes.
No one's paying attention. They're just like, get off the stage. We're waiting for Christy.
Right, yeah,
come on,
right,
Christy.
Yeah.
Come and say what you have to say. And she went over a number of the trials that she'd worked on, and obviously spent a good deal of time on the Gomeshi trial. Mm-hmm. And again, wherever you were on the map around that trial, whether you were on the side of the media that crucified him before he ever even took the stand, she kept saying, this is the law. This is what the law says. This is how the trial went. And this is what happened during that trial.
Yeah.
And it was clear. It was concise. There was no mud slung at anyone.
Right.
Just the facts.
Yeah.
And the facts spoke for themselves.
Yeah.
And whether or not you agreed with what you were hearing in the news, were there credible witnesses? No. But in fact, even though our judicial system, and this is how she concluded, was the fact that even though the system did not fail, the system did what the system's designed to do with the information that was there, regardless of whether you believe in his innocence or his guilt. The court of this land found him not guilty.
Right. Yeah.
Yet his life is still destroyed.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And that was something that she said she had a hard time grappling with, because it's not guilty or innocent until proven guilty anymore. You are guilty in the law, in the media.
Especially if you're one of the media. Mm-hmm. If your job involves getting your face or your name out there to be seen or read by Canadians at large, then again, whether you're guilty or not guilty, you're still that name.
Exactly.
And everywhere you go, people are going to form opinions, especially as time goes by. People might remember the name, but might not remember if he was guilty or not guilty. But he was charged, and you'll remember that.
Yeah.
And that's the failure of the system.
It is. And the other side of that, too, is the person who is guilty and their name being said so many times that it makes them infamous.
Yeah.
The infamous Bonnie and Clyde situation where they become as famous as they always wanted to be in their endeavors. I really thought it was great, this is a little off topic, but in New Zealand, when the Prime Minister of New Zealand refused to say the name of the gunman.
Yes,
and
yeah,
she
right.
said she would not give him
the satisfaction,
the notoriety that he was
yeah.
looking for. And I think that's wonderful. It's,
Yeah.
again, another strong female or a strong person of influence
Yeah, because
sticking to their convictions.
exactly. I mean, you see mass shootings now, and it seems this great rush now. Let's identify the guy behind this, the shooter. Let's find out everything we can about this person. And if he went down in a hail of gunfire, he got his notoriety.
Yes, which is probably what he was looking for in the first place.
Yeah, quite likely. Yeah.
I thought once about going to Ryerson and doing journalism, and I was involved in VTR productions and Eastern Sound and, recording and things like that back in the day, and always admired Christy Blatchford and said, if I ever got into broadcasting, I want to be her. When
Sure.
people look at somebody and they say, I want to be just like them.
Yep.
And I wanted to be just like Christy. So meeting her for me was absolutely fantastic. It was like meeting one of my idols. And I know that people in the industry said that she could be tough to work with. But I think a lot of people who are set in their ways and have the intention of doing the job that is set in front of them without the little chitty chat on the side and all the rest of the nonsense and the getting involved in all the politics and things. I think those people often come across as the ones who are a little abrasive when they, I don't think, mean to be abrasive. I think they're just very focused on what they're doing.
Yeah.
And like you have mentioned, if someone doesn't agree with your opinion,
Doesn't make him a bad journalist.
absolutely not.
No.
But there are some people who take offense to that.
Yes,
Well, they
absolutely.
said this. Well, okay.
Yeah, fine.
I think that's their job to say that.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
And let's just take it from there. Yeah.
It's the way journalism is going, unfortunately, and social media gets a big amount of blame for that because someone will post somebody's comments on Twitter or on Facebook, and then the replies are, "Oh, well, I don't listen to him, or I don't read her because she's a /lefty, righty, whatever." I just don't bother. Maybe these people have a point. Maybe these people have looked at all sides and come up with an opinion. You don't have to agree with it.
Yeah.
But by not reading it, I don't know. It doesn't.
It doesn't
to
give
me,
you both sides of the picture,
exactly,
does
and
it?
you're not informed.
Exactly.
And then you can form your own opinion by reading someone who takes a far left slant, and then reading someone else who takes a far right slant.
Or the person who lands somewhere in the middle.
Yes, exactly. And
But when you ask and they say, well, I wasn't really there, I read about it.
Oh,
I wasn't
yeah.
really there, I just heard about it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was told.
Yeah.
Well, oh, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
There you are looking at Christy Blatchford standing outside the courtroom talking about what happened that day at the Ghomeshi trial, or, all the various trials that she's covered over the years, and in the Bernardo trial, for example, and taking it all in.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah.
People have always commented on seeing her in the courtroom with tears just
Yeah.
streaming down her face.
Yep.
She wasn't putting up a barricade. She was taking it all in and then forming her opinion as to what she'd heard. And that's a tough place to be. But boy, is it ever a credible place to be.
Yeah. Well, if you're good, it's a credible place to be, and she was the best.
Yep, I think she was. I think
Yeah,
I
me
loved
too.
her command of the English lange.
Yeah,
I'm
she's a
so
great
sick
writer.
and tired of reading stuff where I think, really, that's actually a sentence? Oh, man. Someone said to me the other day, oh, it fits me perfect.
It fits me perfect.
And I said, it fits you perfectly.
Dear Teach, learn my kids some English.
Yeah. And I said, you wouldn't say it's a love picture, it's a lovely picture.
Yeah.
So it fits me perfectly. And the response was, I can say it however I want. And I said, yes, you can, but it doesn't make it seem like you finished grade 3. That's the only thing,
I have a great memory of covering a Grey Cup one time. And the late Jim Taylor, great sports columnist out west, we were on a bus to get to, I think, one of the team's morning breakfast. They each team will have a breakfast, and it's great because we can all spend our time getting our advance interviews for the day, in many cases for much of the week at these things. And we were reading the local paper, and I can't remember where the Grey Cup was in this particular town. And there was a sentence that had to be 6 lines long. And, and so then Jim would read the whole thing out, and then he would pause, and there was a sort of pregnant pause, and he said, and there wasn't a single verb. Well, we all just cracked. That was hilarious.
I want to talk to you about your adventure and your story with Christy. We're going to do that after the break.
Okay.
But we both agree her writing was good. If you had to talk about the technicalities of writing, she was a good technical writer.
Yes.
Her emotions were true. Her intentions were always honest.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything that, to me, signifies integrity more than those 3 things.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely
there's a lot
right.
of people who can now be journalists. You can go online and you can write a blog.
Yeah.
You can sign on with one of these sort of underground networks and be published every day of your life if you choose. But that doesn't make you a writer.
No. Or a journalist.
Or a journalist.
Yeah.
And Christy always said she was really miserable at math. She was super bad at math. That's why she was never a scientist. I'm really glad that she was bad at math.
Can you imagine her being a sernetist?
Oh, goodness, no.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I have to say, I love the way she put things. So in the Paul Bernardo trial, she referred to Carla Homolka as a guilty, lip-licking participant. Do you love that?
Brilliant. That's
do
brilliant.
you love that?
I do.
Lipping participant.
I love it. That's
lip-licking. Say that 5 times
Oh,
fast.
no, thanks.
Come on. Peter Piper
You too can be in
picked
radio,
his
right? Yeah.
Pickled peppers. Okay, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation, and we're going to hear about your Olympic story with the famous Christy Blatchford.
There were a few of them, yeah.
We'll be right back. You're listening to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. We're talking with Chris Mayberry today, and we're doing our own community radio tribute to the one and only Christy Blatchford. Stay tuned. We'll be right back right after this. We're back on Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. We're talking with Chris Mayberry today. Chris is a retired journalist, sports director. I mean, you've been all around the industry in a lot of ways, and I won't say what year. You can say what year. You did the Olympics with Christy Blatchford.
In the 1990s, I was actually on the road for 4 different Olympics.
Wow.
Winter Olympics in Albertville, France, and Lillehammer, Norway, and Summer Olympics in Barcelona, Spain, and Atlanta, Georgia.
Wow,
So,
weren't you fortunate?
Yeah, it was great. And
Yeah.
then it came time to let some of the younger guys,
Yeah.
do more of the trips. And
Nice
I
places
stayed
in the
back.
world to visit as well.
Indeed, yes, absolutely. Yeah, great fond memories of those trips.
Yeah, Lillehammer was one of my favorite Olympics.
Oh,
it was just beautiful, and watching the people with the sleds on the streets and everything, it was fantastic.
We got there, I think, on the Tuesday before. Again, and the opening ceremonies were like Friday night,
Yeah.
Lillehammer time, and it did nothing but snow from Tuesday to Friday. And I mean, you're slogging through drifts this is Norway. This is northern Norway.
Yeah, so you're waist deep in it.
You are, and then it got to the time where the opening ceremony started, and it stopped snowing.
Isn't that something?
And for 2 weeks, yeah, we had periods where it was light snow, but most of the time it was very cold, very crisp, sunny weather,
I love that
beautiful
kind of
weather. It was fantastic winter weather. And then at the closing ceremonies on the Sunday, the sun was setting, and just as the sun went down, it started to snow.
Wow.
And it snowed for the next. We got out of there, I think, Tuesday, and we didn't get out of there until Tuesday because it was snowing so badly.
Wow.
But it was those Olympics. Those and Barcelona Summer Olympics were my 2 favorites.
Your 2
They
favorites.
were
Well, tell
great.
us about your time with Christy.
Well, this was in Albertville, and in France, there were buses going everywhere because the venues were so far apart. They might be 30 minutes as the crow flies.
Right.
But to get there, you've got to go through this mountain, over that mountain, and it's a 2-hour trip to the nearest place. So you were taking buses everywhere. Now, I give them credit. The buses always ran on time. If it said 7:38, it left at 7:38.
Yeah.
Unlike some other Olympics. I won't mention any names, Atlanta. But this one time we were at hockey practice and we finished up. And Christy started waving the keys to a Toronto Sun rental car, or a Sun Fury rental car. And came up to me and said, "Want to ride?" And I said,
"Wow.
Oh, yeah." And Larry Tucker, who was with the Calgary Sun, I believe at the time, was a columnist. And so he grabbed the rear seat, and I grabbed shotgun, and Christy drove back to the main press center. About 2 minutes into the drive, Christy's looking for something other than French music on the radio, and
Right.
she finds a Johnny Rivers cassette.
Oh.
And as a cassette player in the 90s, early 90s, so she plugs in this cassette tape, and for the next 90 minutes, Christy and I, at the top of our lungs, are belting out all of Johnny Rivers' hit songs.
Uh-huh.
And poor Tuck in the back seat, he's trying to write, and he's got a column to write as soon as he gets back. So about 3 times, he said, "Guys, can you knock it off? I'm trying to think back here." And Christy would turn back and tell him to do that impossible act. And on we would go, singing at the top of our lungs till we got to the parking lot at the main press center. So that was one of my very favorite.
Well, she had
stories.
colorful language when she wasn't on the air.
Oh.
She had a reputation for the colorful language.
Another great story, and I'm thinking this was a Grey Cup. And we all, the national traveling sports media would always go out for dinner.
Right.
And
Well, you all knew each other. It's a very small club.
Oh, absolutely. Stephen Brunt was our sort of entertainment director.
Right.
He was a columnist of the Globe and Mail at the time, and now, of course, he's on television. And he would always say, "Okay, we got to try this place. Got to try this place. Got to try this place." So we went out for dinner one time. There's probably 15 of us, maybe 16, 17 people. And at the end of it, we have this lovely dinner. And at the end of us, we're all trying to figure out, well, I had the escargot, and so that was this much,
no.
but I had an extra thing. So this went on for about 10 or 15 minutes with no resolution. And finally, Christy whips out her credit card and yells at the top of her lungs, "For sake," slams the thing down and pays for the entire table.
Good for her.
It was great.
Good
That
for
was
her.
her. That was she would put up with BS for only so long, and then she would just
And I
take
think
things in her own
that
head.
showed in her writing, too.
Oh,
and the
absolutely.
way she broadcast. She wouldn't put up with all the
No,
nonsense.
no.
Let's cut through the nonsense, and this is what's going on.
I'm a firm believer that 3 days after she passed, she was upstairs telling the great Almighty how to run things.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
said, "You got this wrong, and you're doing this not right, and this is how you're supposed to be doing it," and so.
I love how she concluded her couch blog about Josie Wilson-Raybould.
Oh yes, yeah.
And she was sitting on the couch, and she went on for about 5 minutes, and I'm thinking, okay, so she's going to wrap it up because there's like 30 seconds left. And she did. She looked dead in the camera, and she said, "She's right, they're wrong, end of story."
Yeah. Beautiful. Perfect. Yeah.
I was like, okay.
And she was right.
She was right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times over the course of people's careers, they've had to do at least once or twice some backpedaling.
Yeah.
Apologizing for something that they said,
Yeah.
apologizing for getting one fact wrong or another. And that wasn't the case with Christy,
No.
because by the time she was saying it, whether it was right after court that day or the following morning or a month later, she had her facts in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
So what she was saying never had to be retracted because it was based on the fact.
Yeah.
And I think that's what she said in one of her broadcasts. She was speaking about the fact that it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. You can't alter the truth. You can't alter the facts.
Yeah, here are the facts. Yeah. And the reason that she liked being in court is because there was a process.
Yes.
And she knew what time it started, what time it ended. The only thing that got in the way of what time it started was the judges and Some of the things she did with the judges were so funny. Like actually speaking up in court, and when they were saying, "I don't know how this could have been done differently." She said, well, you could have been on time. We could start this an hour earlier, like regular people start at 9:00 instead of 10:00. She was funny with the judges that way, but she said there's a process, and the process is followed, and you stick to the process, and you know what's there, and everything is laid out for you. It's very comprehensive, very comprehensive. So there really isn't much wiggle room to misinterpret.
Yeah.
It's there before you. What's the misinterpretation is when it becomes a broken telephone. When someone says, oh, I was there and this is what I heard, they tell someone who says, oh, well, I know the person who was there and this is what they said. And then that's when
15
the
people
broken,
down the line, they're talking about a hockey game last night or
Exactly,
something.
exactly.
She had her critics. I mean, and
For
she
sure,
would take,
everybody does.
She would take stances that were unpopular, and I think of the Jack Layton death when Jack passed, and the whole country was in sort of weepy tears. She thought a lot of it was a sham, and she went on and said this great, it's let the man die in sort of dignity and not this over the top type of coronation, I guess, that they're giving him,
The fanfare.
and the fanfare. And her take on that was very unpopular to a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
As you might imagine. But,
her take on a lot of things.
But she never wavered from it, and that's the thing. With this tremendous negativity coming her way after she made those remarks and comments and what she wrote, she never wavered from it, and that to me is the mark of a journalist who is firm to his or her beliefs completely. And
You got to admire that. I think in
me
this
too.
day and age, especially, you've got to admire that.
Yeah.
And it's. I think Rex Murphy said that she was. She's got a really tough outer shell, but she was a teddy bear on the inside.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's true, especially her coverage of the of Terry Fox.
Oh, yeah. That just shattered her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was there.
Yes, she was. She was in Thunder Bay for the end.
Yeah.
And,
well, she had been there before that.
Yeah.
And saw this energetic, great guy. And then when she heard the news, she went right. She got on a plane and went right back up there.
and almost didn't recognize him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was there to cover the end, which I think, again, is a great quality. How many journalists are that committed to their original story that they would get on a plane and just get right back up there? It's a lot of them take the attitude, or a lot of times it's the business too that takes
that's
the
right.
attitude
Yeah. Well,
of
we've
saying,
covered
no,
that.
we've covered that. You
Yeah.
can't go back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember working on the Operation Sale celebration for the 250-year anniversary of the United States. And I
yes.
as a Canadian, I was part of the Canadian delegation that was working on the information systems that were all around New York City. And after working on the project for close to a year, leaving before the actual celebration,
Yeah.
and 2 days before, getting a phone call from the yacht club in New York saying, hey, Bren, come on down. We've got you a spot on the boat, and you're right behind
Really? Great.
Ronald Reagan. They split up Ronnie and Nancy, and you've got a spot on the boat, blah, blah, blah. You can even ride the Blue Nose if you want. And my company's saying, we're on to another project, and sorry, you can't go.
No.
And I said, what? No, we've got this other thing that's come up, and you got to go and do this one. And, but. And no, I didn't get to go. And to this day, it's one of my biggest regrets after putting all your
of
heart
course.
and soul into this project for so long, and then you don't get to go in the final 2 seconds. And I think it lent to Christy, in the case of Terry Fox, it lent a complete story.
Yeah.
Because she covered it when it was so hype, rah, rah, rah. And then when it was so sad. And it to this day, I think it's one of the saddest moments in Canadian history.
Absolutely.
The announcement that Terry Fox had finished.
It's had to stop his run. And I'd be interested to know if her employers, and I'm trying to remember where she was working at the time. Star,
She was
just
at
for the
the Toronto
timeline.
Star.
So I'd be interested to know if the Star was right on board with her going back up, or whether she had to fight for that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That would be one of those fun backstories that we'll never probably know
No,
unless
exactly.
we find someone who was close to her at that time. And Yeah, but the way that she covered these stories, and then, of course, she moved on to the crime and justice stuff. And I guess she was with the National Post in 1998. And then back to the Globe again in 2003.
Yeah, oh, exactly, yeah.
And people were saying, I heard one of her editors saying, you didn't edit Christy Blatchford.
You didn't dare edit Christy Blatchford.
Imagine.
Yeah. Well, I read another story where someone had to inform her of something unpleasant about the story or something, and they were all sort of taking bets. Okay, who's going to tell Christy? And apparently this young pup who had just joined in the newsroom said, I'll tell her. And they all said, okay, you go ahead and do that. I'm not sure how that ended or whether he's still in journalism or not, but...
And then she went out and she went to the troops, the Canadian troops.
Oh,
and
yeah.
she was very, very involved in the troops in Afghanistan.
I would highly recommend, if you're interested as to the true story of how they had to live and die in Afghanistan, of reading her book. I think it's called 15 Days. Mm. And I just finished rereading it, and it is as gripping as anything I've ever read. It's pure Christy right through, and the feelings she had for the soldiers. And the disdain she had for one or two of the brass, the highest levels, comes through there too. Yeah. Well, disdain might be a little too harsh, but she certainly pointed out whenever she thought the soldiers that she saw were being wronged by the brass.
Yeah, and you know what? I think she was shocked at how the whole thing affected her. Because many times in the writing, I got the impression that she was as surprised as the reader is reading it. How attached that she was becoming. So the book is 15 Days, Friendship, Life, and Death from Inside the New Canadian Army. And
highly recommend it.
She said that it's her best work she's ever done.
I can see that. I've read a few of Christie's books, and they're all excellent. And but that one stands above. And as I say, it was one of the most gripping things I've ever read. And since she passed, I went back and reread it again, and it's almost like I didn't read it for the first time. You know, it was that strong.
So an excerpt from her book, a little thing, says, I didn't realize before I got here how much I would like the country or how stricken I'd be by the poverty and miserable lot that is the ordinary Afghan's life. I haven't spent much time in developing world countries. Very tough seeing all these beautiful kids begging on the streets. They're so damn smart and resilient, but what lousy luck, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, luck of the draw. Where are you born? You know, and
but the way she writes, it's just like
put you there.
She's somebody you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Know?
Yeah. I've always admired that ability of her writing. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like she's your next door neighbor. You know, just
and
like
isn't that a trick too in itself?
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
Quite a talent to be able to write like that, to be able to put a person in that position. And I think that's what everyone liked about her dog too.
Oh.
You know, the way she talked about the dog, the way she always had the dog in there, and she could not abide anyone who hurt animals in any way.
Oh,
she was, you know, he kept her company for more than 13 years, her doggy, and. I have a friend
of mine. I have a friend of mine who lived in her area. Who didn't know her at all. Certainly knew of her, and she was out walking her dog one day and ran into Christy. And Christy suddenly spent 20 minutes with her, just talking with her and asking about the dog. And she was they talk about dogs are man's best friend. Well, dog's best friend was always Christy Blatchford. Any dog, anywhere.
That's for sure. Yeah. And she says about Obi, she says, he is so handsome. Brow furrowed in concentration, white eyelashes visible against his cheek, usually one or another of his ears turned inside out, and strikes such charming poses rolling over onto his back to expose a pink fat belly, or when on his tummy sticking his legs straight out behind him like a tadpole, that I can't bring myself to move him, and I can barely take my eyes from him. And that's why I got nothing done this week. I'm being held hostage by a 20-pound bull terrier with black and pink lips and a chesty wiggle, and all I can think is Stephen Harper is out of his mind if he thinks that paying parents a pittance to stay home with their youngsters is the only way. What parents need is choice, choice, and more choice. And she gets that out of staying home with her dog.
With her dog, yeah.
You gotta love it.
Yeah.
You just gotta love it.
Yeah.
I can't say enough good things about Christy, and I'm so glad that you are part of the Whistle family
Oh,
now,
it was, yeah.
and you
was,
have stories to share.
I'm just thrilled you asked me to come on and share them because she was, I didn't know her well. I was one of those other journalists from someplace else, and in the interim years when my job was basically to stay home in a newsroom, occasionally I'd go out and be part of a scrum somewhere.
Yeah.
And I would sort of see her, and we just sort of wave at each other, and we never spoke, but just because we were all too busy, but acknowledged each other's presence. I first met Christy, and knew of her, admired her, loved her work. I first met her at an intercounty baseball game at Christie Pitts.
Wow.
And the owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs intercounty baseball team is an old colleague, Jack Domenico. And so I'm sitting there on the hill, and what you don't pay admission, but they bring the plate around like church almost, and you put a buck or two in, and sort of pays for what they have to spend. And Christy and her boyfriend at the time and their dog would always be at every game. And I remember saying to Jack one time, "Is that Christy Blatchford?" And he said, "Yeah." And so next thing I know, I'm being introduced to her by Jack. This is, and Jack was he still is a gruff old guy. And he, "Hey, Blatch, get over here, meet somebody. Mayberry, get over here and meet somebody." One of those deals,
And you didn't do what I did. You didn't do the Christy Blatchford.
Yeah, no, I didn't. We just sort of chatted about life, and she found out, being a Windsor boy, that I cheer for all Detroit teams. Still do. I'm a big Red Wings fan, a Tigers fan, and whatnot. So about 2 weeks later, we were taking part in a charity celebrity softball, media softball thing, again at Christie Pitts. And Blatch, who was writing, she was never Christy, by the way. She was always Blatch. To one and all, And she was writing for The Sun, her lighthearted piece. So she wrote a piece in advance of this softball game we're going to be in. And she listed the team members and gave everybody nicknames.
Uh-oh.
And then for me, it was from CKEY, Chris Detroit Mayberry. So, and I wore a Tigers jersey to the game, and we all got a big laugh out of that. And that's where I first met Christy. And then, when I actually got the Canadian Press and moved up, she made a point of coming over and saying, "Congratulations, you do good work." Because she had occasionally, before she went to 1010, she would do the occasional commentary for us at CKY, Key 590 it was called at the time. We were playing oldies. And so I would see her in the studio from time to time after that as well. And then when I got to Canadian Press Broadcast News, she made a point of coming over, congratulating me on this, and because it was a big step up for me, and which I thought was very nice. She didn't have to do that, but
no, of course not. But that goes to her integrity again. So.
Well, and we got along great. We did get along great. We laughed. I don't know how many times we laughed about stuff. And at the Olympics, this was always great too, because you're 6 hours ahead of North America.
Yes.
So, or our part of North America, at least the Eastern time zone. So we would check, and like first thing in the morning, or if it's a weekend thing, if it's a game and Detroit was winning, because she was a closet Detroit fan too. And so we would sort of, sort of holler across the huge newsroom in the main press center, checking the Red Wings. Yeah. Did they win? Yeah. Sort of give thumbs up to each other. So that was funny.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you were able to come on the show.
I appreciate.
Christy.
I am equally happy that you invited me. Thank you.
Honor a Canadian icon, a Canadian journalist that we will all miss. That's for darn sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we haven't even skimmed the surface of the Bernardo trial and the child abuse trials that she covered. a couple of trials. I mean, we did mention the Ghomeshi trial, but boy, at another time, we can go into more detail on some of these things. And I would challenge all the listeners who are not familiar with Christy's work to take a read now and again, to read her book about the justice system, because apparently it is a fantastic read.
Just about to start that one, actually.
And you know what? So am I. But I think today a nice way to finish this off is to read a little bit of what Rex Murphy wrote. And he concluded his article about Christy Blatchford. And of course, he was in the same world just like you for years and years and years. And I always admired Rex Murphy as well.
Me too.
So Rex says, "So it is a sad time. Journalism is measurably diminished by her departure. But her example, her books and columns will continue. Journalism schools could vastly profit by highlighting what a real spirit of independent thought and courageous writing can do for a career and for the profession. The Canadian military will more than miss her voice and presence. And Canada has lost a rare and special person who lived so many of the virtues, integrity and intelligence, bravery and kindness of a truly exceptional human being."
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. That's all I can say to that.
Yeah. I was thinking of what I could say in conclusion, and I can't even come close to the eloquence of Rex Murphy on that one.
Yep.
Chris Mayberry, thank you for being our guest today.
My pleasure. I'm thrilled you asked me, and always a pleasure, Bren. Thanks.
And Jay, thank you for all your work you do behind the board. It was wonderful. Have a great day, everyone. And today, go and try and change the world. Have a Freshwaves kind of day.